Welcome to our 2017 10 Best Cars. Each year for more than 3 decades, we've put dozens of new cars through thousands of miles of cumulative evaluation to determine our annual list of the very best automobiles for sale in America. The rules for consideration are simple: entrants must cost less than $80,000, anything pricier should be excellent by default, and they must be either a returning winner or all new or significantly revised. Winning isn't easy, however. In order to take home a trophy, a vehicle must offer good value, excel at its given mission, and, critically, deliver a pleasurable driving experience. These 10 cars deliver all of those qualities in spades. While none of them are perfect, they come closer to that ideal than anything else you can buy new. This year, 10 Best again proved that there are some nice cars to choose from if you've budgeted $40,000 to $50,000, but few are as entertaining as BMW's top 2 series models, with their combination of humble size, pouncing, liquid thrust from the optional 6 spots, and piano wire tension to the controls. You can see why we picked the M235i last year, but the world keeps turning. The 2 Series lineup gets new monikers. The 230i replaces the 228i as the base 4-cylinder, the M235i becomes the M240i, and now there's the juiced M2, basically an M240i with flares, chairs, tires, brakes, and a suspension tune, plus another 30 horsepower, though it can only match the M240i's torque with a time-limited overboost function. The M240i has a sporting suspension, but it won't liberate any loose dentistry. The rigid M2 will, this extremist shaking our fillings over the rougher sections as the steering sniffed feverishly for apexes. The M2 prefers corners to straights the same way a German Shepherd prefers pork chops to applesauce, but that's part of its hyperactive charm. Cars like the M2 form the radioactive core of BMW's performance credibility, and the M240i backs off just enough to please drivers who find it a little too hot at the center. Well, that's idle dreaming. As sunrise on the day after 10 Best, here's where the votes piled up. On the M240i, a small car hugging tight a 335 horsepower turbo inline 6, and the M2, the same vehicle but with all slack drawn out of the suspension and steering. The cars may be small, but the prices are mighty. The M240i starts at $45,445, and the only color that isn't a $700 option is white. The M2 begins at $52,695, again, white only if you don't want to pay extra. If you wish to celebrate BMW's small car heritage and expertise, BMW makes you pay dearly, indeed, bleeds you white. But people will pay it. There are no comparable options because the industry has largely abandoned to front drive platforms buyers of compact sports sedans who wish to drive a compact. To accept a 2 Series into your life, you have to want small, not Mini Cooper snug but what was considered midsize only a couple generations ago, and be willing to live with 2 doors and a fumble bum way they make you squeeze into the teensy backseat. Plus that price. It's a lot to ask, we know, but if you need to get away in a ship that steers like a star, this is your car. The Bolt was also the only EV in this year's test. We would love to tell you how it compared with the pricier and glissier Tesla Model S, but despite our repeated requests, Tesla refused to supply us with a car and thereby failed to defend its 10 Best berth. We've since changed our cologne and started to chew mints. The Bolt is inexpensive but still a pricier proposition than conventional internal combustion rivals, arriving at its $29,995 price tag only after the $7,500 federal EV tax credit gets factored in. Design is where our opinions on the Bolt divided. The Korean pen styling had both fans and haters, but the most asked question was why GM chose to launch its brave new electric architecture in the guise of a geeky hatchback rather than one of those crossovers people are lining up to buy. The cabin is practical and spacious enough, although we found the roofline too low in back. The interior materials feel tough and durable but not upmarket. Inside, it feels closer to $20,000 than $30,000, but it's easy to do the math on that one. GM has disclosed that it's paying LG $145 per kilowatt-hour for battery cells, meaning the 60 kilowatt-hour lump is responsible for $8,700 of the car's cost. And that's before you consider the price of the motor, the transaxle, the wiring, and the cooling system. The Bolt is a car that inspires respect rather than poetry. Its presence here is justified on the strength of its engineering rather than its looks or performance numbers. It advances the EV game further than anything since the launch of the Model S. Like every pure electric vehicle, it requires compromise. You could fly from LA to Europe in less time than it takes to replenish the battery pack from empty using a household 110-volt socket. Yet the Bolt is irrefutably a landmark car, as sensible as you'd expect an Electron-powered Chevrolet to be, and welcome proof that established automakers can indeed make class-leading electric vehicles. The almost identically sized Camaro nearly matches the Merc's accelerative performance. The SS won the balls to 60 miles per hour in 4.1 seconds and through the quarter in 12.4 seconds at 116 miles per hour. It would be slightly quicker if it were equipped with the company's 8-speed automatic, but the one is available only with a 6-speed manual. We aren't complaining. The Camaro's big 6.2-liter V8 is down on horsepower to the boosted Mercedes V8. But because the Camaro's 3,747-pound curb weight undercuts the C63's by 355 pounds, the two have near identical power-to-weight ratios. And bear in mind that these are effectively the same numbers that a standard Camaro SS can achieve for as little as $38,000. It's without reservation that we voted the Camaro back onto the 10 best list for 2017. Or, at least, put the V6 and V8 powered coupes, and they're one of the versions, on the list. The 2.0-liter turbocharged base Camaro, in its first 10 best trial, was not nearly as well received. The chassis is willing, but its Turbo 4 has uneven power delivery and sounds tragic. It doesn't share in the award. Neither does the convertible Camaro. We tested a V6-powered convertible that proved to be the polar opposite of the 2.0-liter coupe, a willing powertrain stymied by a soft and floppy chassis. As for Mercedes, well, it should remember that it took Chevrolet 50 years to start making Camaros that are this good. Also, it can take solace in the fact that a Chevrolet Impala makes a pretty miserable substitute for an S-Class. Last year, the Corvette missed the 10 best cut after the C7's 2-year run. Perhaps the intoxicating influence of the 650 horsepower Z06 would have helped the Corvette gain enough votes for another year, yet by then GM had raised the price above our $80,000 cap. Enter the Grand Sport, which mates the regular Corvette powertrain to the chassis of the mighty Z06 while avoiding a major price increase. You can park a GS in your driveway for as little as $66,445, exactly $10,000 more than the base car and nearly $15,000 less than the Z06. We all heard it, the GT350 busts through its first 2 gears quickly enough that the raspy moans it makes at low revs are fleeting spine tinglers. Running to 60 miles per hour takes only 4.3 seconds. But rev it out in higher gears, and the engine sounds as if it's munching on itself, ready to rocket some pistons through the hood. None of that comes through the exhaust, however. From outside, the GT350 sounds the way a Jackson Pollock painting looks. It's a splattering of sound, fiery, shocking, angry, and somehow perfect. Below 4,000 revolutions per minute, the GT350 lacks the Corvette's deep well of torque. Swing the needle past 8,000 revolutions per minute and tap the 526 horsepower, though, and it's hard not to think that maybe that Chevy V8 belongs in a pickup. Double the GT350's $56,770 price, and there's still nothing as exotic as this Romeo Michigan-built engine. The GT350 also found its spot on our 10 best roster because it is a transcendent machine that looks like a Mustang. Senior technical editor and GT350 advocate Casey Colwell summed it up: "There are arguments for both, but the GT350 is by far the most complete car. I drove the Grand Sport and the GT350 back-to-back twice to come to that conclusion. The Ford is more desirable, more practical, and cheaper. It's okay with enough of us that the engine isn't easy listening. You don't want a car like that to make the equivalent of elevator music anyway. As unnecessary as it is wonderful, this engine transforms the Mustang into something esoteric. If all this means that we have two V8 cars with similar missions and pricing, so be it. We are living in halcyon days for performance cars, and our votes reflect that. After all, the big V8 deserves its own place next to jazz and the television sitcom as a uniquely American art form." In early 2009, when GM and Ford were stumbling toward uncertainty and the Detroit Auto Show had all the glitz of an insurance convention, no one could have imagined that the Motor City would ever again produce cars like the GT350 and the Grand Sport. But it's well known that car companies can be at their best when they're anxious about keeping the lights on. Both of these cars came from a hunger to prove that world-class virtue can be more than marketing talking points. And so, 8 years after the doom and gloom, we have these two unimaginably good V8 machines and the $64,000 question. Believing that there'd only be space for one of these cars on the list, our staff was divided, with the GT350's backers on one side and the Grand Sports on the other. In the final summation, each car had the votes to last year. The Corvette missed the 10 best cut after the C7's 2-year run. Perhaps the intoxicating influence of the 650 horsepower Z06 would have helped the Corvette gain enough votes for another year, yet by then GM had raised the price above our $80,000 cap. Enter the Grand Sport, which mates the regular Corvette powertrain to the chassis of the mighty Z06 while avoiding a major price increase. You can park a GS in your driveway for as little as $66,445, exactly $10,000 more than the base car and nearly $15,000 less than the Z06. Clinch its spot, but the Rift helped us arrive at a deeper understanding of both. The GT350 also found its spot on our 10 best roster because it is a transcendent machine that looks like a Mustang. Senior technical editor and GT350 advocate Casey Colwell summed it up: "There are arguments for both, but the GT350 is by far the most complete car. I drove the Grand Sport and the GT350 back-to-back twice to come to that conclusion. The Ford is more desirable, more practical, and cheaper. It's okay with enough of us that the engine isn't easy listening. You don't want a car like that to make the equivalent of elevator music anyway. As unnecessary as it is wonderful, this engine transforms the Mustang into something esoteric. If all this means that we have two V8 cars with similar missions and pricing, so be it. We are living in halcyon days for performance cars, and our votes reflect that. After all, the big V8 deserves its own place next to jazz and the television sitcom as a uniquely American art form." The Accord is a kitchen appliance, engineered to offer an ambitiously broad set of buyers a car that makes them feel smart and secure. It is quiet and roomy, safe and efficient, inexpensive yet well-equipped. It is a rational choice in a sea of rational choices. What sets it apart, as we've noted in 30 past 10 bests, is the way it drives. This is the front-wheel drive sports sedan that nobody seems able to consistently recreate, a car that flows from corner to corner with predictability and gratification, its engine loaded for exit, its preferred manual transmission slid tightly into gear. There is a controllability and a precision to the Accord that unburden its driver from thinking too hard about going fast, or from really worrying about much of anything. So, unfortunately, does the engine. The Mercedes 2.0-liter turbo 4 strains valiantly and mostly silently to motivate the car. But despite its 9-speed gearbox shuffling for aces, the engine cannot match the lunging spirit of the Honda's naturally aspirated 4, regardless of the latter's 50-plus horsepower deficit. And the Accord's V6 positively shames the Benz and will until such time as the AMG E43 and E63 versions arrive. Mercedes, God bless it, strives to stay at the bleeding edge of technological innovation, now increasingly defined as software development. But software is cheap, and it's unfortunate for luxury car makers that this technology has trickled down so much more quickly than hardware ever could. For while Honda's safety suite, called Honda Sensing, can't claim the technological leadership of the Benz's semi-autonomy, it's a pretty damn good net, one well suited to determined drivers who only occasionally admit to checking their phones. The 10 Best competition throws odd pairings together but always in the service of the same question: is this the least expensive version of the best possible car? When it comes to the Accord, that answer is yes. The appliance is the driver's car and the luxury good is the somewhat distant, automated one. How about that? Mazda built the millionth Miata in 2016, cementing its standing as the best-selling roadster of all time. It exemplifies the roadster ideal so perfectly and singularly that it's easy to imagine the word Miata becoming Xerox for roadsters or fun. Just in case, Mazda already holds a trademark for the word roadster, as that's what the MX-5 Miata is called in its Japanese home market. Of course, there's little need these days for a generic term for a small and sporty convertible two-seater, since there aren't many left. Mazda's only direct competitor is a new entry from Fiat, but the 124 Spider is a re-engined and retuned MX-5 built by Mazda. With its own sheet metal and a Fiat engine, the Miata left most editors at 10 Best scratching their heads and wondering why you wouldn't just choose the original. The Miata's engine is its biggest concession to economies of scale. It's similar to the Skyactiv 4-cylinder in the Mazda 3, although oriented longitudinally. It sings a pleasant song and revs freely to its 6,800 revolution per minute redline, and while 155 horsepower won't impress Ford Mustang and Chevy Camaro owners, it's enough to get the MX-5 to 60 miles per hour in under 6 seconds. No matter the shape, the greatness of the Miata represents a continuing dedication to the sports car ideal. That's a rare thing these days. Mazda, along with Porsche, somehow makes a business case for building pleasurable, desirable, and soulful vehicles, the Miata suffering not at all for its lack of competition. Both of these nameplates are winners, and both exist in a world of their own. It's a world we're glad to live in. The 3-tested gear was a top-of-the-line Grand Touring hatchback model fitted with the only engine available with that trim, a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated inline 4, and a 6-speed manual transmission. A 6-speed automatic is a $1,050 option. A sedan can be had for $750 less, but we'd gladly pay the premium for the extra storage space and the easy access liftgate. We think that the hatch simply looks better, too. Our test car rang in at $28,030, handsomely equipped with the Grand Touring's standard leather-trimmed interior, power seats, and 7.0-inch touchscreen infotainment display with redundant rotary controller. It also carried the $1,600 premium equipment package, LED lighting, adaptive headlights, navigation, and a heated steering wheel, and the $1,100 active safety package, lane departure warning, lane keeping assist, adaptive cruise control, and Mazda's smart braking system, a form of automated braking assist. Most automakers won't let American buyers have these optional safety features with a manual transmission, preferring that the car be able to select gears on its own if, say, traffic conditions require the adaptive cruise control to slow it down from freeway speeds to a crawl. Mazda's system, which operates between 18 and 99 miles per hour, alerts the driver via a dashboard warning and chime to assume control and shift down to avoid stalling the engine in such circumstances. The car didn't distinguish itself in braking, either, needing a considerable 185 feet to stop from 70 miles per hour, or 20 feet more than the long-term test car needed when it was similarly new. A Ford Focus SE EcoBoost we tested earlier this year needed only 173 feet, while a Volkswagen Golf TSI took just 168. Not many cars in the segment outperform the Mazda 3's 0.84 grams of grip on the skid pad, but many match it, so it can't rightly be called the leader of the pack. The 3 returned 34 miles per gallon on our 75 mile per hour, 200-mile highway fuel economy test, besting the EPA's 33 mile per gallon highway rating. With its smaller displacement turbocharged engine, the 2016 VW Golf achieved 40 miles per gallon in the same test. The Mazda 3's best qualities can't be accounted for in braking distances or acceleration times. Instead, it's the subjective elements that make the Mazda great: the obedience of the steering, the confidence-inspiring gearbox, the eager chassis, the upscale interior. All the controls feel balanced, delivering proportionate responses to equivalent efforts. This Mazda is the kind of car that brings out the best in the driver, even if it's just on the daily commute. It's so easy to drive well that it discourages lazy habits in favor of trying to perfect every shift and carve every corner.
If you read anything about Porsche's junior sports cars, the 718 Cayman and 718 Boxster, during the last year, you probably know that its mid-cycle update went well beyond the cosmetic nips and tucks typical of automobiles entering midlife. In addition to the rear fascia, headlight, and taillight revisions, each got new sheet metal stampings for all fenders and both door skins. Interior upgrades included redesigned upper dashboards, new steering wheels, and revised infotainment logic with more connectivity options and device compatibility. The Boxster and Cayman also received completely retuned chassis, upgraded brakes, and even a newly shared numerical designation 718 to help clarify that they are simply two variants of the same model. But the most consequential changes by far were the replacement of the sonorous, naturally aspirated 2.7 and 3.4-liter flat-six engines with turbocharged 2.0-liter and 2.5-liter flat-fours in the Standard and S models. Test them all. If you like us, you worried about how Porsche would maintain these cars' ebullient characters, so much of which resided in those legendary, mid-mounted flat-sixes, with their peaky but delightfully linear power, above roughly 3,700 revolutions per minute, and richly mechanized thrum emanating from just behind 1's ears. Both new four-cylinders are more powerful than their six-spot predecessors, and the cars are offered in a number of model, transmission, and body style combinations, with numerous nifty performance options to help sharpen their edges. But we wondered if there may be a 718 sweet spot that would make us forget all about the flat-sixes of yesteryear. Hardtop or roadster? Revised 6-speed manual or state-of-the-art dual-clutch automatic? Would the 2.0-liter S 300 horsepower and 280 pounds-to-foot be?
With its Golf, Volkswagen manages to imbue every trim level with the same understated feel, regardless of specification or price. Even the 292 horsepower Super Golf, retains this essence. Its performance is additive rather than disruptive to the base car. Volkswagen fits its slowest Golf with only 15-inch wheels, yet such a concession doesn't manifest cheapness. All Golfs drive with a solid composure and predictability, with controlled body motions and the ride quality of a far more expensive machine. Similarly, the Mazda 3 line demonstrates control response worthy of single-purpose performance cars but does so with drop-the-kids-off livability. Look inside, and their merits are equally vivid. In both the 3 and the Golf, everything a driver touches moves with a precision that punches above C-segment standards. Both offer well-finished stitched leather or functional fabric. Modern materials and styling combine in ways that present beautifully while begging no functional compromises. Despite the sport's attractive stitched leather, Hyundai's finished choices across the Elantra line lack such easily recognizable material and assembly quality. The Elantra, for its part, offers controls that are first-order intuitive. The center stack buttons, virtual or otherwise, are well prioritized to make tasks like pairing a phone or changing a station symbol and rapid. For all the functionality of this vertical slab of secondary controls, however, the thoughtfully fashioned presentation of the Mazda and VW is missing. Recognizing that Hyundai's performance model struggles to maintain pace with our favorites, some voters were eager to back the Eco as the best of the Elantras. Its 35 mpg combined DPA rating comes with 156 pound-feet of torque and a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. That it's quicker than Hyundai's mainstream Elantra models only makes it sweeter. If fuel economy were our only concern, the Elantra Eco would top the miserly versions of the 3 and Golf. Driving, however, still wins the day. And it's here that the Eco, like the Sport, struggles. At every trim level, the 3 and Golf are fulfilling cars to drive. Their controls are painstakingly engineered to feel precise and predictable. Their pedals return meaningful response, and their steering wheels deftly manage direction. The Elantra, by comparison, speaks in relatively muted tones. So, despite the Elantra's huge gain on our winners, it is, ironically, the little things that keep it from beating them.